I'm now joined by Isaiah Hole, lead publisher of WolverinesWire.com, backed by USA Today Sports. Michigan comes out of the Big House with a win against Maryland. Craziest fact, Michigan has not had this great of a passing game since Maryland in 2016. What was working so well for Shea in the offense?
Well, I think it all starts with the offensive line, honestly. That's one of the things where I don't understand why there's a lot of people still out there that don't think that Michigan's offensive line has been that good, but they've really powered everything. It's given Shea plenty of time to throw the ball. It's given Shea, not only Shea, the ability to throw the ball and survey the field, but Karan Higdon's been doing really well. They're averaging just over 5 yards a carry through 6 games. Pretty impressive when you consider that against Notre Dame they only averaged 1.6. So they've really kind of brought everything back as far as getting back to what they wanted to do. And then Shea, obviously, he's seeing the field really well. He's able to move in the pocket, and he's able to move the pocket. On top of that, you look at plays like that touchdown to Donovan Peoples-Jones where Maryland brought an extra blitzer, and Shea just easily kind of rolled to his left and made a throw to Donovan. And rolling to your left and throwing is not easy. That's a very, as quarterbacks will tell you, that's one of the more difficult things that you can do, and that's not something that every quarterback can do. And yet he did it, and he made like just a nice little read, nice little throw to Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Peoples-Jones made a play after that. So he's seeing the field really well, and Jim Harbaugh likened it to being kind of like a point guard, just being able to survey the court. That's what Shea's been able to do, and a lot of it, like I said, starts with the offensive line. Yeah,
one of the areas that the team seemed the most confident in is the offense, regardless of the fact that the defense is #1 now in passing defense and in total defense. How much more confident does the offensive line and this offense in general just come off?
Well, I mean, the confidence is I think what's helping fuel everything right now, because they, against Notre Dame, it was such a struggle, and then now you're starting to see them actually dominate up front, wear teams down. Ben Bredesen talked about today about how they're starting to really sense that defenses are starting to tap out. They get that extra touchdown, make that extra drive. You get to that point where you can sense it, you can feel it. And that's really important for this offense to really start to get to that, because they develop a killer instinct like the defense already has. Michigan could become that much more dangerous, especially, right now going into a 3-game stretch in which Michigan really needs to have that type of killer instinct. They cannot think that they're going to go in and have a slow start. They can't go in and think that the other team's going to roll over, because these are teams that, at least preseason, were considered to be teams that Michigan would lose to.
Last time Michigan faced a ranked opponent in College Game Day it was Week 1 Notre Dame. Why is Michigan so much better prepared to go into this stretch of very competitive games coming up?
Well, I think because the offense has really found itself. I think the offense was trying to figure out what it was going to be there in Week 1. First time that you have Shea Patterson in a live game experience. A lot of these offensive linemen, I mean, some of them have played together, but not in the configuration that it had. The only 3 people out of the 5 that had played those positions before were Bushell Beatty and Michael Onwenu and Ben Bredesen, but Bredesen was the only one that had significant experience. Cesar Ruiz played a lot last year, but it was at right guard when Onwenu was out. So Onwenu and Ruiz didn't play together. You had a lot of unfamiliarity there. I mean, you got familiarity through camp, but not as much when you have actual practical game experience. So now they have that. Now they know what they're going to do on the field. They know how they're going to make everything work, and that type of familiarity breeds success. And I think that that's really helped quite a bit.
Michigan will face the #4 rushing offense in college football, led by Jonathan Taylor for the Wisconsin Badgers. And right now, Michigan's rush defense is #6. They only allow about a little over 97 yards a game, with Wisconsin averaging about 287 rushing yards per game. Is that going to be Michigan's biggest concern going into this game?
Oh, absolutely. But the good news for Michigan is that Wisconsin does not have a very lethal passing attack. It's down near the bottom third of all of college football. Now, we do know that Alex Hornibrook can be a very good quarterback. He was very good against Michigan, made an NFL throw that really put the game away in 2017 in Madison when he split the defenders in the end zone. But at the same time, because Alex Hornibrook is so erratic. He had a couple 54% games, and then he turns around and has a 77% game. Most of the time, they're only asking him to throw the ball for 120-something yards, 140 yards, but then he can go out there and throw for 250 yards. Because of all of that, Michigan's really going to want to put the ball in his hands, which does mean they're going to do everything they can to try to stop Jonathan Taylor, because you don't want that guy to beat you. You don't want the guy that you know is going to be able to beat you to go in and beat you. And Jonathan Taylor is a special talent. He's one of the best that's, not even just in the Big Ten, but in the country. And he's proven it between last year and just it hasn't stopped this year. So, I mean, it's a pretty daunting challenge, but when you look at what Michigan's defense has done to pretty much every team it's faced so far, is really limited the output of what that team generally does, especially the things it does well. You look at Maryland this last week and how Maryland likes to run the ball, was the 11th rushing offense coming in. Michigan limited it to 147 yards. You look at what Northwestern did the week beforehand. Northwestern came into the game with, I don't know that it had really lofty numbers as far as where it actually was in a passing offense, but it was in the upper tier. And Clayton Thorson is considered by many to be a guy who is a top tier possible first-round draft pick at quarterback, and he looked like he was slinging the ball around for a minute, but then they ended up holding him to 170 yards, just under 175 yards, but it was 174 in that game, which was well below his average. And then you see some of these teams turn around and have amazing games right after the fact, like Clayton Thorson did last week at Michigan State. So Michigan doesn't let you do what you do well, and I would imagine they let Jonathan Taylor rush for 183 yards last year, which was a bit below his average. So obviously they don't want him to get that high this year. But if they can hold him to, say, 150 and then let Alex Hornibrook do kind of what he's already doing, that puts them in pretty good shape.
You have a prediction for Wisconsin rushing yards and passing yards. What would they be total offense-wise?
I mean, if Michigan, if they hold true to what they've been able to do so far, in holding teams to about anywhere between 40 and 60% of their average, I would imagine you would see something around 150 to 175 rushing for Jonathan Taylor and the rest of the backs. And then as far as passing, you're looking at an offense that's not even getting 200 yards a game. So I would say, because they're tending about 175, I believe, seeing them get about 100 yards, that Michigan, I would predict that Michigan will hold them to about 275 yards of offense total.
Wow. That's less than their rushing yards per game average.
That's my prediction. I think that Michigan will hold them to that point, just because we've seen it so far. There's a track record there to this point that Michigan's defense can do that. And with it being a home game and the crowd behind them, I think that they'll actually, if this was on the road, I might predict differently, but with it being at home, I think that they've got a really good shot.
Do you think the whole outcome of the game would be differently if this was at Wisconsin?
Yes, but Michigan still seems like it's working to try to get its bearings on the road. Even at Northwestern, where it was a very home-friendly crowd, about 70% of the fans there were Michigan fans. So the fact that it still took like a slow start and everything like that, it just seems like now Northwestern's clearly a better team than people thought. But at the same time, Michigan just plays much better at home.